So hi, my name is Aaliyah. I am, as Natasha said, finishing up my JD here in August. Hopefully after writing these exams, which I'm sure I'll be okay. Excuse me. I have done my undergraduate degree from SFU in Vancouver or in Burnaby. I completed that in 2020 and then got stuck in the pandemic and was like, as Natasha said, some of us had to figure out what we were doing, kind of where we wanted to go. So I did try to do the LSAT, go down that route, but as we've all seen, sometimes there's hurdles and that's okay. Life doesn't always go to plan. I did go through Austrek and try to determine like what was a good option for me. I was also considering the UK. Kind of what led me more towards Australia was just the culture dynamic and being able to get better acclimated into the Australian culture because it was more comparable to the Canadian culture. That was advice from my mother, which we should always listen to. So that I think was a really good decision. And then I did have friends that went to the UK and I got to kind of compare our experiences. And like a lot of it does come down to just as was mentioned, like here in the Gold Coast, life here is very different. It's very lax. Like you do get to get time to go to the beach on weekends. You do have both like your downtown area and then also like like different coffee shops. And it's very different in the Gold Coast where like if you go to a different city or a different suburb, like you can be in a completely different dynamic and it's really cool, like culturally speaking. In terms of Bond itself, like there's so many events and opportunities that you can go to that can keep you connected to the school. And I know like one of the biggest fears is like, how am I going to make friends or like find my place or anything like that? And honestly, that's fair enough. Like I didn't know anybody that was even applying to Bond when I first started. I got lucky in the sense that when we all started to connect between our JD program, there were quite a few of us that were all from Surrey. So we were able to meet beforehand before even coming to Bond because we started the program online. But once you get to Bond, like you'll see that the Canadians we tend to stick together and like not necessarily like clump together, but we all are just better known with each other. And it's actually a very small world out there. So as soon as you find somebody from your city, from your province, from your something, you're like, oh wow. And then you know this person. And it's very easy to pick up on that. And like anybody that is coming, they're all in the same shoes as you. So everyone's willing to kind of put that extra olive branch out or find a different way to reach out and make that connection. But it's also like what you put in is what you're going to get out. So you like the at Bond, there's also like the Canadian Law Students Association, as Natasha mentioned. There's so many events that get run throughout the semester. And if you consistently go to those and like try to talk to people, like you'll be able to make friends without a doubt. In terms of the Canadian Law Students Association, as mentioned, I am the president right now, and it's been such a great opportunity. When I first started, I was just like an outbound director and got to start with the seminar that kind of teaches you about the NCAs. And then kind of worked my way up, became treasurer, and then now I'm here sitting as president. And it's just a good way, again, to feel like a part of the community at Bond, and then also like a sense of like accomplishment when you're able to run these events for the other Canadian students and be part of just a group of students that are all trying to help each other out. It's also just a great resource. So even if you're not necessarily on the committee, on the club, like the CLSA office is always there. The door is always open. You're always able to just go and ask like help, or even if you just want to like grab a snack, sit with anybody, just study, like it's always available too. In terms of the Canadian courses that get offered, like the girls did a great job of explaining like how all those courses are helpful. The professors that teach those courses, they stay up to date with the NCAs. So they are constantly bringing them up and they themselves make sure that the knowledge that they are teaching actually follows the NCA syllabus that gets provided to them as well. So with that, they're staying up to date with current case law, staying up to date with any changes in statute, anything of that. They'll let us know of like, oh, also there's this case that's coming up in the Supreme Court. It'll most likely be applicable in your NCA. So start to prep for it now, even if a final decision hasn't been made on it, but they'll be ready with that knowledge to offer you. So when you are leaving, you don't feel like, oh, like, did I even learn Canadian law? Like, will I be able to go back and apply this? That ease definitely does come the more you take those classes. And they're all offered by people that have either practiced law in a different way or are still continuing to practice law either in Canada or in Australia. Some of the professors will come and do like that one course that they teach throughout the year, and then they'll go back to Canada and practice. So you know that they're still staying up to date with what they're practicing, because it is still their livelihood when they go back to Canada. It's also a good way to make connections. If you do start to talk to those professors, then they do remember you. And if you do like need help getting an articling position or even a job while you're in Australia, they're very quick to help and be like, okay, what can I do? Where do you need the assistance? Like, I can do that for you. A lot of my experience does compare to SFU, where SFU is a very big university and Bond is, I think, only 4,000 or 5,000 students in total. So it's very small, tight knit, where professors know you by your name. You don't have to like send them a long email going like, this is me, this is my assignment, this is what I did. Like, they'll be walking to a coffee shop, say hi to you, stop, have a conversation. So it's very good that way. Bond also does a good job of skill building. So as much as researching and writing and all of that is important, it's also important to build on your skills of oral speaking, negotiation, stuff like that. So they have like through Natasha's presentation, she had pictures of like the moot courts and stuff like that. We do actually use that throughout our classes. So there are assessments where you get placed in a moot court. Your professor acts as a judge and you kind of get to practice how it is to be behind a bench. And the more you do so, the kind of less anxiety you have when it comes to the real world. So it's very nice to kind of get that kind of firsthand practice. And it also helps when you go back to Canada, because I have spoken to lawyers there of where they already know that those skills are already started to get ingrained within us and that we're already building upon those. So like all of that helps that anxiety of like, how am I going to go home and start practicing? But I will say, like, now that I'm almost done my journey, like I definitely feel like I'm not leaving empty-handed. I'm not leaving going, oh, like there's so many gaps in my education and anything like that. Like I feel very equipped to be going back, writing those NCAA exams and kind of just moving forward. In terms of what I'm doing next, I did decide to apply for my Master's of Law, and I am going to be starting that in September. So at Bond, when you get your Juris Doctor degree, getting a Master's of Law is only one semester. And like the time between when you actually finish your classes, which in my case is August, and you actually get your accreditation, which would be in October, and then can actually apply for the NCAs. Really, your earliest to start writing is usually about December, January, depending on the earliness of the availability, just in terms of registration and all of that. So I thought in the meantime, I would just prefer to get more education. Some of my other friends are choosing to go back to Canada and start working as like a legal assistant or working in a law firm, and that's completely okay. And then in the meantime, they'll be studying for those NCAA exams. As much as they're exams and they sound scary, it is just a 50% pass. And as Natasha says, most of us tend to do better than that in our regular classes in Canadian law. So as long as you're doing okay in the Canadian law courses, you'll be okay for those NCAA exams. And it is basically a prep course. Like they have everything from like top to bottom of all that preparation that you need. Even like when I was looking at the NCAA syllabus, it pretty much replicated the syllabus that I've gone through those classes. And then after that, it's just going through the process of starting to article. In terms of networking opportunities, as much as we're in Australia, we have a career development center at Bond, and they're highlighting a very big gap of like making sure that there isn't one, but with the alumni that are going back into the Canadian culture, back towards Canada. Like now that I'm graduating, they've already called me and going or asking, okay, where are you going? Where do you need help? So they stay connected with you. Like Austract helped me up until that point of where I decided which school I wanted to go to. Then I got connected with my regional manager and I was helped there. Now I'm graduating and I'm still getting connected and I'm still getting help from that after point of now I'm going into the next step. And you never kind of have like nobody. There's always like that connection where you still feel like you have a resource to go to. And that's like truly how I felt and how I feel supported. And I don't feel like, oh my God, I'm scrambling. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? So I wouldn't really stress about all of that. You do have the support there for it. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Am I missing anything?
No, not that you're missing. I actually, just when you were speaking about returning home and what some of your classmates are doing, it gave me a deja vu, because I think about last year, myself, you, Casey, and Aman were on a video also speaking with students, and you guys were at different points in your education. I had a quick update from him recently that he's been working for his articling job now in criminal law, criminal defense here in the Toronto area. So that was just a few weeks ago. He was touching base with me. So again, just the way that students are returning, they are clearing those exams. He let me know he passed all of them on the first go. Legal writing and research was done whenever it needed to be done. And he was on to searching for jobs. He got himself out there to our first alumni event that we had in Toronto in September, did a little bit of networking, finding out what are people up to that are in those later years. They've been a few years into practice, and he kept working it and he got his job. So things like that are, I think, more of the norm when you're a bond alum and coming back to the environments that we have here in our major cities in Canada. And then when you're in smaller cities too, and towns, you're reaching out to those that you're finding on LinkedIn and looking up who went to my university and now might be working in my hometown. We might be a few years apart in age, but they obviously share something in common with me. Why don't I reach out to them? And usually you'll get a response back, because people love reminiscing about the great days in the Gold Coast and hearing about what's going on now with students and how things have changed or what has stayed the same. So there's always that nice little bit of commonality that you share, no matter if you've done your degree 10 years ago, like Basil, or you're just a few years out, or I'm no longer just a few years out, but a few years into practice. So there's lots of networks out there that you can tap into.